The most dangerous man in Colorado Territory stood bleeding in the dirt outside Elena Mercer's general store, 3 bullets already in him, reloading his revolver with shaking hands while the Braddock gang closed in from every direction. The woman he loved was trapped inside with killers breaking through the back door, and Coulter Hayes knew with absolute certainty he was about to die. But that morning had started so differently. With nothing more dangerous than the way she'd smiled at him across the counter, her dark eyes holding a question neither of them had been brave enough to ask. Now Silver Creek was burning, innocent people were screaming, and everything that could have been was about to end in blood and gunpowder. This is the story of the cowboy every woman wanted, the shopkeeper who refused to chase him, and the day their unspoken love became the only thing worth dying for. If you're watching from your city tonight, drop a comment below and tell me where this story is reaching you. I want to see how far Elena and Coulter's journey can travel. The first time Elena Mercer truly noticed Coulter Hayes, he was standing in the middle of Main Street at sunrise, with his hand resting on his gun, staring down 3 drunk cowhands who'd decided to settle an argument by shooting out the windows of the Silver Creek Saloon. She'd come out to sweep the boardwalk in front of her store like she did every morning, broom in hand, apron already dusty, hair tied back in a practical bun that never quite stayed neat. The street was otherwise empty. Most of Silver Creek was still asleep, which was the only time Elena actually liked the town, when it was quiet enough to hear yourself think, before the noise and chaos of another day rolled in like a dust storm. The cowhands were loud, angry, and armed, the kind of stupid that got people killed on the frontier. One of them was waving his pistol around like a toy, laughing too hard, swaying on his feet. Coulter Hayes didn't say a word. He just stood there, 20 feet away from them, perfectly still. He wasn't a big man, tall enough, lean in the way men got when they spent more time riding than eating, but there was something about the way he held himself that made him seem larger, older, more dangerous than his face suggested. Elena stopped sweeping. She'd seen Coulter around town for maybe 2 weeks. He'd ridden in on a dust-colored horse, wearing a long coat despite the heat, his hat pulled low. He didn't talk much, didn't drink much, spent most of his time at the edge of things, watching. A few of the town girls had already started whispering about him, about his looks mostly, because he was the kind of handsome that made women do stupid things. Strong jaw, dark hair that needed cutting, eyes the color of winter sky. But there was something in those eyes that made Elena uncomfortable, something cold and distant and unreachable. Now, watching him face down 3 armed drunks without flinching, she understood what that look meant. He was a killer. Not the kind of man who got angry and shot someone in a rage. The other kind, the kind who'd done it enough times that it didn't bother him anymore. One of the cowhands finally noticed him. "The hell you looking at?" Coulter's voice was quiet, flat. "You're done." "Done?" The cowhand laughed, but it sounded nervous. "Who the hell are you?" "Doesn't matter. You're leaving. Now." The drunk squinted at him, trying to decide if he was serious. Then he made the mistake of raising his gun. Coulter's hand moved. Elena didn't even see him draw. One moment his revolver was holstered. The next, it was aimed directly at the cowhand's chest, cocked and steady. "Don't," Coulter said. The street went absolutely silent. The 3 cowhands looked at each other, then at Coulter, then at the gun that had appeared in his hand like magic. They left. Coulter stood there until they disappeared around the corner. Then he holstered his weapon, turned, and walked toward the saloon to inspect the broken windows. He never once looked at Elena. She went back to sweeping, but her hands were shaking. Baki. The second time Elena noticed Coulter Hayes, he was standing outside her store. It was 3 days later, mid-morning, and she was behind the counter going through her father's old ledgers, trying to make sense of numbers that refused to add up the way they should. The general store had been in her family for 12 years, but her father had died 8 months ago, kicked by a horse, sudden and stupid and unfair. And now it was hers. Just hers. A 24-year-old woman trying to run a business in a town that didn't quite believe she could. The door opened. She looked up. Coulter Hayes stepped inside, hat in hand, and nodded to her. "Ma'am? Help you with something?" She kept her voice neutral, professional. "Need ammunition. 44 caliber. Back wall, 3rd shelf." He walked past her, boots quiet on the wood floor, and Elena went back to her ledger. She was aware of him moving through the store, the way you're aware of a storm gathering on the horizon. He didn't browse, Didn't touch things he wasn't buying, just found what he needed and brought it to the counter. She rang it up. $2. He paid in silver coin, exact change. Their fingers didn't touch. You're Elena Mercer. It wasn't a question. She looked up at him, suddenly wary. That's right. Your father was Frank Mercer. He was. Coulter nodded slowly, like he was filing the information away. Heard he was a fair man. He was. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Elena studied his face, trying to figure out what he wanted. Men didn't usually make small talk with her. They bought what they needed and left, or they tried to flirt, which she shut down fast. This felt like neither. Something else? She asked. No, ma'am. He put his hat back on, touched the brim. Appreciate it. Then he left. Elena stood there, watching through the window as he crossed the street and disappeared into the crowd. She didn't know why her heart was beating faster, didn't understand why that brief conversation felt significant. She went back to her ledger and told herself to stop being ridiculous. The third time Elena noticed Coulter Hayes, he saved a child's life. It happened fast. A little boy, maybe 6 years old, the blacksmith's son, ran into the street chasing a rolling hoop right into the path of a freight wagon barreling down Main Street at full speed. The driver was hauling timber, couldn't stop in time, didn't even see the kid until it was too late. Elena was standing outside her store. She opened her mouth to scream. Coulter came out of nowhere. He grabbed the boy around the waist and dove, both of them hitting the ground hard and rolling clear as the wagon's wheels missed them by inches. Dust exploded everywhere. The driver hauled back on the reins, cursing. The wagon finally stopped 50 feet down the road. Coulter sat up in the dirt, still holding the boy, who was crying but unhurt. The blacksmith came running, white-faced, snatching his son out of Coulter's arms. Jesus Christ, thank you. I didn't see him. He's fine, Coulter said. He stood up slowly, brushing dust off his coat. His elbow was bleeding where he'd scraped it on the ground, but he didn't seem to notice. Keep a closer eye on him. The blacksmith nodded frantically, clutching his son. I will. God bless you. I will. Coulter walked away before anyone could say anything else. Elena watched him go. Her hands were pressed against her chest, heart still hammering. Around her, people were talking about how fast he'd moved, how close it had been, how lucky the boy was. But Elena wasn't listening to them. She was watching Coulter disappear into the shadows between buildings, limping slightly, bleeding, alone. Something shifted inside her chest, something she didn't have a name for yet. By the end of his first month in Silver Creek, Coulter Hayes had become the subject of intense speculation. The men respected him because he was clearly dangerous, and frontier towns respected dangerous men who didn't cause trouble. The women were fascinated by him because he was handsome and mysterious and hadn't shown interest in any of them, which only made them try harder. Sarah Ann Beckman, the banker's daughter, made a point of walking past the saloon every afternoon when Coulter was usually sitting on the porch. Margaret Chen, whose family ran the Chinese laundry, offered to mend his coat for free. Even widow Elizabeth Grant, who was 35 and should have known better, started attending church again just because Coulter sometimes sat in the back row. Elena watched all of this with a mixture of amusement and irritation she refused to examine too closely. She told herself she didn't care. Told herself Coulter Hayes was just another drifter who'd move on eventually, like they all did. Silver Creek was a waypoint, not a destination. Men like him didn't stay. But every morning when she opened her store, she found herself glancing across the street to see if he was there. And he usually was. Sitting outside the saloon or leaning against a post, or walking past with that easy, dangerous grace that made people step aside without realizing they were doing it. He never came into her store again. Never spoke to her. But sometimes, just sometimes, she'd catch him looking, just looking. And then he'd glance away, like he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't. Elena didn't know what to make of it. Didn't know what to make of the way her pulse jumped every time she saw him. She was not the kind of woman who lost her head over a handsome face. She'd had suitors before. Good men, hard-working men, men her father had approved of. And she'd turned them all down because she'd been too busy keeping the store running, and none of them had made her feel anything worth risking her independence for. So why did Coulter Hayes make her feel like she was standing too close to a fire? The first real conversation they had lasted exactly 43 seconds. It was early June, hot and dry, the kind of day where the sun felt personal. Elena was outside, struggling to move a shipment of flour sacks that had been delivered to the wrong side of the loading dock. Each sack weighed 50 pounds, and she'd already moved 6 of them, and her back was screaming. "Need help?" She turned. Coulter was standing there, sleeves rolled up, looking at her like he'd asked the most natural question in the world. Pride made her want to say no. Common sense won. "Yes." He didn't smile, didn't make a show of it, just stepped up beside her and started moving sacks like they weighed nothing. They worked in silence for a few minutes, and Elena was acutely aware of how close he was, the heat coming off him, the way his forearms flexed under his shirt. "You run this place alone?" he asked. "I do." "That's a lot of work." "I manage." He glanced at her. "I can see that." Something in his tone made her look up. Their eyes met. Held. Elena felt her breath catch, then Coulter looked away, grabbed the last sack, and carried it inside. When he came back out, he was already turning to leave. "Thank you," Elena said. He nodded. Didn't say you're welcome, didn't say anything, just walked away. Elena stood there in the heat, heart pounding, and wondered what the hell was happening to her. Basad. 2 days later, she heard the rumors. Coulter Hayes had been asking questions about her. It came from Margaret Chen first, who mentioned it while picking up thread. "That cowboy, the quiet one, he was asking my brother about you." Elena's hand stilled. "What kind of questions?" "About your store, how long you've been running it, whether you had family. My brother didn't know much, so he sent him to talk to Mrs. Patterson." Mrs. Patterson was the biggest gossip in Silver Creek, which meant by now half the town probably knew Coulter had been asking about her. Elena didn't know how to feel about that. Flattered, suspicious, nervous, all of it at once. She went back to work and tried not to think about it, failed completely. That night, lying in her small room above the store, she stared at the ceiling and wondered what Coulter Hayes wanted from her. Wondered if she wanted him to want anything at all. The next morning, he was waiting outside her store when she opened. Elena stopped in the doorway, key still in her hand. "Can I help you?" "Probably not," Coulter said. That surprised her into almost smiling. "Then why are you here?" He looked uncomfortable, like this was the last place he wanted to be. "I heard, people are talking." "People always talk." "Not about me, about you." He shifted his weight. "I didn't mean to cause you trouble." "You haven't." "I was asking questions. About you. I shouldn't have." Elena studied him. He wouldn't quite meet her eyes, and that told her more than anything he'd said. "Why were you asking?" "Doesn't matter." "It does to me." Coulter was quiet for a long moment. Then he finally looked at her, and the expression in his eyes made something in Elena's chest tighten. "I wanted to know if someone was—" He stopped, started again. "If you were spoken for." The words hung in the air between them. Elena's pulse was racing. "I'm not." He nodded slowly. "All right. Is that what you wanted to know?" "Yes, ma'am." "You could have just asked me." "I could have." He almost smiled, didn't quite. "But I'm not good at that." "At asking questions?" "At talking to women, He stopped. "At talking." Elena felt something dangerous unfold inside her chest, something warm and terrifying. "You're talking now. This is different." "How?" Coulter looked at her like she was being deliberately difficult, which she absolutely was. "You know how." "Maybe." She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "But I want to hear you say it." For a moment she thought he wouldn't, thought he'd just walk away like he always did, disappear into the crowd, leave her standing there wondering. But he didn't. "I notice you," Coulter said quietly. "Have been noticing you since the day I got here." Elena's breath caught. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I'm not the kind of man you should be noticing back." "Shouldn't I decide that?" "You should." He turned his hat in his hands. "But you don't know me. Don't know what I've done. So tell me." "I can't." "Can't or won't?" "Both." Elena wanted to be frustrated with him, wanted to tell him that wasn't good enough, that if he wanted something from her, he needed to actually try. But there was something in his face, something haunted and resigned, that stopped her. "You're not a good man," she said slowly. It wasn't a question. "No, ma'am." "But you're not a bad one either." Coulter looked at her like she'd said something profound. "I don't know what I am." "Then maybe you should stay long enough to find out." He didn't answer, just stood there, holding her gaze, and Elena had the sudden wild thought that if she reached out and touched him right now, something would change. Something neither of them could take back. She didn't reach out. Neither did he. "I should go," Coulter said finally. "You should." He put his hat on, nodded to her, walked away. Elena watched him go, heart pounding, and knew with absolute certainty that nothing about Coulter Hayes was going to be simple. For the next week, they circled each other like wary animals. Coulter didn't come into her store, but he was always nearby, sitting on the saloon porch where he could see her front door, leaning against a post across the street, walking past at the exact time she usually took her lunch break. He never approached her, never tried to talk, just watched. And Elena watched back. She told herself it was ridiculous, told herself she had work to do, inventory to manage, a business to run. She didn't have time for whatever this was. But she found herself looking for him anyway, found herself disappointed on the rare occasions when he wasn't there. The other women in town noticed. "He's interested in you," Sarah Ann said one afternoon, trying very hard to sound like she didn't care. "Everyone can see it." Elena was measuring out sugar, didn't look up. "Is that so? Aren't you interested back?" "I don't know him." "None of us know him. That's what makes him interesting." Elena glanced at her. Sarah Ann was pretty in a delicate way, with blonde curls and blue eyes, and the kind of beauty that made men stupid. She was also spoiled, entitled, and used to getting what she wanted. "If you're interested, you should talk to him," Elena said mildly. "I have. He's not interested." "Maybe he's not interested in anyone." "He's interested in you." Sarah Ann's voice had gone cold. "Everyone knows it. I don't know what you did to catch his attention, but I didn't do anything." "Then maybe you should stop encouraging him." Elena set down the measuring cup slowly. "I'm not encouraging anyone. And if Coulter Hayes is interested in me, that's between him and me. Not you." Sarah Ann's face flushed. She grabbed her sugar and left without another word. Elena went back to work, but her hands were shaking. She wasn't used to this. Wasn't used to being at the center of gossip, to having people watch her, to feeling like she was doing something wrong just by existing. Silver Creek was a small town. Everyone knew everyone's business. But Elena had always been good at staying out of the drama, at keeping her head down and her focus on work. Coulter Hayes had made that impossible. What? That evening, after she closed the store, Elena went for a walk. She did this sometimes when her head got too full. Walked to the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open prairie, where the sky was big enough to breathe under. The sun was setting, painting the horizon in shades of orange and gold, and the air had finally cooled. She didn't realize Coulter was following her until she'd gone half a mile. Elena stopped, turned. He was maybe 20 feet back, standing in the middle of the dirt road. "Are you following me?" she called. "Yes." His honesty surprised her. "Why?" "Town's not safe after dark." "I've lived here my whole life." "Doesn't make it safe." Elena walked back toward him, irritated now. "I don't need protection." "Maybe not." He didn't move. "I'm still following you." "Why?" Coulter looked at her, and in the fading light his eyes were very blue. "Because if something happened to you, I'd never forgive myself." The words hit her like a physical thing. Elena stopped walking. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." "What does that mean?" "It means—" He stopped, shook his head. "Doesn't matter. Stop saying that." Elena closed the distance between them, frustrated and confused and feeling things she didn't understand. "Stop acting like nothing you think matters. If you have something to say, say it." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I'm going to leave." The words came out flat, final. "Eventually, I always leave. And if I say what I'm thinking, if I—" He stopped again. "It wouldn't be fair to you." Elena stared at him. "You think I need you to protect me from yourself?" "Yes. That's insulting. It's true." "I'm not a child, Coulter. I can make my own decisions." "I know that. Then stop making them for me. They stood there, 3 feet apart, the sun sinking behind them. Coulter looked at her like he was memorizing her face, like he knew this was a moment he'd think about later. I'm not a good man, he said quietly. I've done things you can't imagine, killed people, hurt people. I came here because I was running from something, and eventually that something is going to catch up with me. When it does, anyone standing close is going to get hurt. He paused. I don't want you hurt. What if that's my choice to make? It's not. Why? Because you deserve better. Elena felt something crack open inside her chest. And what if I don't want better? What if I just want... She stopped, couldn't finish the sentence. Coulter's jaw tightened. What? Nothing. Elena. The sound of her name in his voice made her close her eyes. This is stupid. Yeah. We barely know each other. I know. You're probably leaving anyway. I am. Then why does it feel like this? She opened her eyes, met his gaze. Why does it feel like I've been waiting for you without knowing it? Coulter didn't answer. Couldn't, maybe. He just looked at her, and Elena saw everything he wasn't saying written across his face. He wanted her badly enough that it scared him, and he was still going to leave. Go home, he said finally. It's getting dark. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to push him, make him admit what they both knew, but something in his expression stopped her. He wasn't going to give in. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. She turned and started walking back toward town. After a moment, she heard his footsteps behind her, keeping pace but not coming closer. He followed her all the way home. Waited until she was inside with the door locked. Then he disappeared into the darkness. Elena stood in her room above the store, looking out the window at the empty street, and felt something inside her shift. Something irreversible. She didn't know what was going to happen, but she knew, with absolute certainty, that Coulter Hayes was going to break her heart. 3 days later, everything changed. The news came in just after dawn, brought by a cavalry scout who rode into town half dead from exhaustion. Elena was sweeping her boardwalk when she heard the commotion, people gathering around the scout, voices rising in panic. She left the broom and walked over. Army payroll, the scout was saying. $50,000, hidden here in Silver Creek while they reinforce the escort. But the Braddock gang found out. They're coming. Elena's blood went cold. Everyone in the territory knew about the Braddock gang. They were butchers, murderers, led by a man named Jacob Braddock, who'd once killed an entire family because the father tried to stop him from robbing a train. The gang had been terrorizing the frontier for 3 years, and the army had never caught them. When? The sheriff asked. 3 days. Maybe less. The scout looked around at the gathered crowd. If you can leave, leave now. If you can't, arm yourselves. They're going to burn this town to the ground. Panic rippled through the crowd. People started talking all at once, about leaving, about staying, about whether they could defend the town. Elena stood frozen, trying to process what she'd just heard. $50,000. Hidden somewhere in Silver Creek. The Braddock gang was coming. In 3 days, people were going to die. She turned to head back to her store, mind racing, and nearly ran into Coulter. He grabbed her arms to steady her. You all right? Did you hear? I heard. His face was grim. You need to leave town. I can't. The store. Forget the store. It's all I have. It's not worth your life. His grip tightened. Elena, listen to me. When they come, they're going to kill everyone who gets in their way. You need to go. What about you? Something flickered in his eyes. I'm staying. Why? He didn't answer, just looked at her, and Elena suddenly understood. You know them, she said slowly. The Braddock gang. You know them. Coulter's face went blank. Get your things. Get out of town. Do it now. He let go of her and turned to walk away. Elena grabbed his arm. Don't you dare walk away from me right now. If you know something, I know enough to know you're not safe here. Then tell me. I can't. Damn it, Coulter. I rode with them, he said, and the words came out like a confession. 5 years ago, before I knew what kind of men they were. When I figured it out, I left. I betrayed them, stole money they'd taken from a bank and gave it back to the people they'd hurt. Jacob Braddock swore he'd kill me if he ever found me. He paused. He's been hunting me ever since. Elena stared at him. So they're not here for the payroll. They're here for both. Coulter's voice was flat. Jacob won't pass up $50,000, but once he finds out I'm here, and he'll burn this whole town down just to get to me. Then leave. If you leave, maybe he won't. He'll still come. He already knows about the payroll. Coulter looked at her, and his eyes were full of something she'd never seen before. Regret. But you're right that I should go. If I'm here when he arrives, more people will die, so I'm leaving, but you're leaving first. I'm not. Elena, this is my home. My father built this store. I'm not abandoning it. Your father is dead. He'd want you alive. The words were harsh, brutal, and true. Elena flinched. You don't get to tell me what my father would want. Fine. Coulter's face was stone. Then I'm telling you what I want. Get out of Silver Creek before they come. Go somewhere safe. Stay there until it's over. And if I don't, then I can't protect you. I'm not asking you to. I know. His voice dropped. But I'm going to anyway. They stood there in the middle of the street, people rushing past them, panic spreading through town like fire. Elena looked at Coulter and saw everything he wasn't saying. He was staying because of her. Because he couldn't stand the thought of leaving her unprotected, even if his presence made things worse. Because somewhere in the last month, without either of them meaning for it to happen, this had become something neither of them could walk away from. 3 days, Elena said quietly. If that. Then we don't have time to argue. Coulter's jaw tightened. You're not staying. Yes, I am. Elena, I'm staying. She met his gaze. And if you try to force me to leave, I'll hate you for it. So don't. He looked at her for a long moment. Then something in his face shifted, gave in. All right, he said quietly. Then we'd better get ready. Elena nodded. And somewhere deep inside her chest, beneath the fear and the panic, something settled into place. Something that felt like inevitability. The Braddock gang was coming, and Coulter Hayes wasn't leaving. Whatever happened next, they were facing it together. Silver Creek had 48 hours to prepare for war, and nobody knew what the hell they were doing. The sheriff, a decent man named Tom Garrett, who'd spent most of his career breaking up bar fights and chasing cattle thieves, called an emergency town meeting in front of the courthouse. Nearly everyone showed up. Elena stood near the back, arms crossed, watching Coulter lean against the side of the bank building with his hat pulled low. He wasn't part of the crowd, wasn't trying to be, but everyone knew he was listening. The Army says they can't spare troops to defend us, Sheriff Garrett announced, voice strained. They're stretched thin fighting the Sioux up north. We're on our own. A man Elena didn't recognize, some rancher from outside town, shouted from the crowd. Then we leave. Pack up and get out before they arrive. And go where? Someone else yelled back. This is our home. A home ain't worth dying for. The hell it isn't. The argument erupted fast, voices overlapping, people shouting over each other. Elena watched the panic spread like spilled whiskey, ugly and uncontrollable. Some families were already loading wagons. Others were boarding up windows. A few men had rifles slung over their shoulders, trying to look brave, but Elena could see the fear in their eyes. Nobody in Silver Creek had ever faced anything like this. Sheriff Garrett raised his hands, trying to restore order. Listen to me. Anyone who wants to leave, leave now. No shame in it. But those of us staying need to organize. We need shooters on the rooftops, barricades at both ends of Main Street. You're talking about fighting the Braddock gang, a woman interrupted. Elena recognized her. Mrs. Patterson, the gossip, clutching her shawl like it could protect her. They're killers, professional killers. What chance do we have? We have numbers, Garrett said, but his voice lacked conviction. We have farmers and shopkeepers with hunting rifles, Mrs. Patterson shot back. They have 15 men, Coulter said. Every head turned. He pushed off the wall and walked forward, slow and deliberate, until he was standing at the edge of the crowd. People moved aside without realizing they were doing it. 15 men, Coulter repeated. Maybe 16 if Jacob picked up strays. They'll come in fast and loud, trying to scare you into surrendering. If you panic, you lose. If you hold your ground, you've got a chance. Sheriff Garrett looked at him, wary but desperate. You know them, I do. Then you know how they fight. I do. A long silence. Then Garrett nodded. All right, talk. Coulter scanned the crowd, his gaze cold and assessing. Elena watched him calculate who would run, who would fight, who would get themselves killed doing something stupid. They'll hit at dawn, Coulter said. That's Jacob's preference. Likes the light just right. Bright enough to see, dim enough that people are still groggy. He'll send 2 riders ahead to scout, then the rest will come through in a line, shooting anything that moves. They'll go for the bank first, then the sheriff's office, then they'll burn the rest of the town if anyone fights back. How do we stop them? Garrett asked. You don't stop them. You make it hurt enough that they leave. That's not much of a plan. It's the only plan you've got. Coulter turned to face the sheriff directly. You need shooters in high positions. Post them on the hotel roof, the saloon, the church steeple. When the gang rides in, your men wait until they're committed, middle of the street, nowhere to take cover. Then they open fire. You won't kill all of them, but you'll kill enough that the rest think twice. A younger man, one of the ranchers, spoke up. What if they split up, come at us from multiple directions? They won't. Jacob likes the spectacle, likes riding down the center of town like he owns it. He'll expect you to surrender the moment you see them. Coulter paused. Don't. Elena listened to him talk and felt something twist inside her chest. This was a different Coulter than the one who'd followed her home in the dark, worried she wasn't safe. This was the man he'd been before he came to Silver Creek, the man who'd ridden with murderers and learned how they thought, the man who knew exactly how much blood was about to be spilled. Sheriff Garrett looked around at the crowd. Anyone who wants to leave, now's your chance, no judgment. But if you're staying, we've got work to do. About a third of the people started moving toward their homes, heading for packed wagons and frightened families. The rest stayed. Elena stayed. Coulter's eyes found hers across the crowd. She couldn't read his expression, but she didn't look away. After a moment, he did. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of frantic preparation. Men hauled sandbags and scrap lumber to build barricades at the north and south ends of Main Street. Others climbed onto roofs, testing sight lines, figuring out firing positions. Women gathered medical supplies, bandages, alcohol, needles, thread, and set up a makeshift hospital in the church. Children were sent to hide in cellars and root cellars, told to stay quiet no matter what they heard. Elena turned her store into a supply depot. She gave away ammunition, rope, nails, anything people needed. Didn't charge a cent. The ledger her father had kept so carefully didn't matter anymore. If they survived this, she'd figure out how to rebuild. If they didn't, money wouldn't matter anyway. Coulter appeared in her doorway around midday, rifle in hand. Need anything? He asked. Are you asking as a customer or Elena stopped. She didn't know what he was. Why are you here? Checking the building, making sure it's defensible. You think they'll come here? I think they'll go everywhere. He stepped inside, eyes scanning the layout, the windows, the back door, the staircase leading to her room upstairs. You need better locks and boards over the front windows. I'm not boarding up my store. Elena, if I board it up, I can't see what's happening outside, can't help. You shouldn't be helping. You should be in the church with the other women. That made her laugh, sharp and bitter. The other women? You mean the ones tearing bandages and praying we don't all die? Yes? I'm not doing that. Coulter turned to face her, jaw tight. You're staying here, in your store, during a gunfight. It's my store. It's a death trap. Then I guess we'd better make sure they don't get this far. They stared at each other. Elena could see him trying to find an argument that would work, something that would convince her to hide, to stay safe, to let other people fight while she waited to find out if she'd still have a home when it was over. He wasn't going to find one. You're stubborn, he said finally. Yes? You're going to get yourself killed. Maybe. And you don't care. I care. Elena stepped closer. I care that this town is about to be destroyed because of money I never asked to be hidden here. I care that people I've known my whole life are going to die. I care that you... She stopped. That I what? Nothing. Elena, you're here because of me. The words came out raw, unplanned. You said you were leaving, but you're still here, and we both know why. So don't tell me I don't get to fight. Don't tell me I have to hide while you... She couldn't finish. Coulter looked at her like she'd punched him. You think I'm staying because of you, aren't you? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quiet, dangerous. If I thought leaving would keep you safe, I'd be gone already. But it wouldn't. No. So you're staying? Yes. Because of me. Coulter closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, something in his face had changed. The walls he kept up, the distance he always maintained, gone. I'm staying because if something happens to you and I'm not here, I'll never forgive myself. I'm staying because the thought of Jacob Braddock anywhere near you makes me want to kill him with my bare hands. I'm staying because... He stopped, shook his head. Doesn't matter why. It matters to me. It shouldn't. Why not? Because I'm not the kind of man who stays, Elena. I'm the kind who leaves, who ruins things, who gets people killed. You think you know me, but you don't. You don't know what I've done, the things I know enough. You don't. Then tell me. I can't. Elena wanted to scream, wanted to grab him and shake him until the truth fell out. You're a coward. That got his attention. His eyes snapped to hers, sharp and angry. Excuse me? You heard me? You're a coward. You'd rather walk away than risk actually caring about something, about someone. You hide behind this idea that you're too broken, too dangerous, too whatever, but really, you're just scared. You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I? Elena stepped closer, heart pounding. You want me. I know you do. You've been watching me for weeks, following me around like some kind of ghost, and now you're staying to fight a battle that's going to get you killed, and you won't even admit why. I told you why. No. You gave me excuses. She was close enough now to see the muscle jumping in his jaw, the way his hands had curled into fists. You want me to believe you're some kind of monster who doesn't deserve happiness, but I don't believe it. I think you're just afraid. Of what? Of this. Elena reached up and touched his face. Coulter went absolutely still. For a moment, neither of them moved. Elena could feel his heartbeat through his skin, fast and hard. Could see the war happening behind his eyes, wanting to pull away, wanting to stay, wanting something he'd convinced himself he couldn't have. You should go, he said roughly. I'm not going anywhere. Elena, neither are you. He caught her wrist, but he didn't push her away, just held it. His thumb brushed against her pulse, feeling it race. This is a mistake, Coulter said. Probably. We don't have time for this. I know. In 2 days we might both be dead. I know that too. He looked at her like he was trying to memorize her face, like he knew this moment was all they were going to get. I've killed 12 men. 3 of them didn't deserve it. I robbed a stagecoach when I was 19. I've lied, cheated, stolen. I left my brother to die because I was too scared to go back for him. That's who I am. That's who you'd be. Elena kissed him. It wasn't gentle, wasn't soft. It was desperate and messy, and born out of fear and frustration and something bigger than both of them. Coulter made a sound low in his throat, surprise maybe, or surrender, and then he was kissing her back, one hand tangled in her hair, the other gripping her waist like he was afraid she'd disappear. They broke apart, breathing hard. That was stupid, Coulter said. Yes. We can't. I know. Elena, shut up. She kissed him again, softer this time, and felt him give in completely, felt the last of his defenses collapse. When they finally pulled apart, Coulter rested his forehead against hers. You're going to be the death of me. Not if the Braddock gang gets you first. That surprised a laugh out of him, short and bitter, but real. You have a dark sense of humor. I'm a realist. You're terrifying. Elena smiled despite everything. Good. They stood there for a moment, wrapped up in each other, the rest of the world temporarily forgotten. Then Coulter stepped back, and the distance returned. Not as much as before, but enough. I need to check the other buildings, he said. All right. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me or the sheriff. Coulter, please. The word sounded like it hurt him to say. Just this once, do what I ask. Elena wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. Fine, he nodded. started to leave, stopped in the doorway and turned back. For what it's worth, I'm glad I met you. Then he was gone. Elena stood in her empty store, hand pressed against her mouth, and tried not to think about how final that had sounded. Secret. That night, the town barely slept. Elena lay in her bed above the store, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of preparation continuing in the street below. Hammers, voices, the scrape of furniture being moved. At some point, she heard gunfire, someone testing a rifle, and her whole body went rigid before she realized it was just practice. She didn't sleep. Around 3 a.m, she heard a noise downstairs. Footsteps. Quiet, but there. Elena grabbed the pistol she'd placed on her nightstand and moved to the top of the stairs. "Who's there?" "It's me," Coulter's voice. Elena sagged with relief, then anger. "I could have shot you." "You wouldn't have." "You don't know that." "Yeah, I do." He appeared at the bottom of the stairs, just a shadow in the darkness. "Can I come up?" Elena should have said no, should have sent him away. Instead, she stepped back. "Come up." He climbed the stairs slowly, carefully, like he wasn't sure he should be there. When he reached the top, they stood facing each other in the narrow hallway. "Couldn't sleep?" Elena asked. "No. Me neither." "I know. I saw your lamp was on." That sent a flutter through her chest. "You were watching my window?" "I've been watching your window every night since I got here." He said it matter-of-factly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Making sure you're safe." Elena didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process the idea that this dangerous, broken man had been standing guard over her for weeks without her knowing. "That's a little unsettling," she said finally. "I know. And oddly romantic." That surprised a small smile out of him. "You have strange taste." Apparently, they fell into silence. Coulter looked around her small room, the narrow bed, the dresser, the window overlooking Main Street. Everything neat and simple and practical. Very Elena. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "I know. People will talk. They're already talking. It'll make things worse." "I don't care." He looked at her. "I came to say goodbye, in case I don't get the chance later." Elena's throat tightened. "Don't say that. I need to. Need you to know." He stopped, started again. "If things go bad tomorrow, if I don't make it, you'll make it." "Elena, you will." She stepped closer, fierce now. "You'll make it because you're the best fighter in this town, and because I'm not losing you before I've even figured out what this is. Understand?" Coulter looked at her like she was the most impossible thing he'd ever encountered. "You barely know me." "I know enough." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." Elena reached up and touched his face again, the way she had that afternoon. This time he leaned into it. "I know you're brave and broken and trying so hard to be better than you think you are. I know you saved a child's life without hesitation. I know you've been protecting me since the day we met. That's enough." "It's not." "It is for me." Coulter caught her hand, pressed his lips to her palm. The gesture was so tender it made her chest ache. "I don't deserve you. Stop deciding what you deserve. Just—" Elena pulled him closer. "Stay. Tonight. I don't want to be alone." She saw the war in his eyes, saw him trying to do the right thing, to maintain some kind of honor, to not take advantage of her fear. Then he gave in. "All right," Coulter said quietly. They lay down together on her narrow bed, fully clothed, wrapped up in each other. Elena pressed her face against his chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong. His arms came around her, holding her like she was something precious. Neither of them slept. They just lay there in the darkness, stealing whatever time they had left. Outside, Silver Creek waited for dawn. The sun rose blood-red over the prairie. Elena woke to find Coulter already gone, his side of the bed cold. For a moment she panicked, thought maybe she dreamed the whole thing, that he'd never been there at all. Then she saw the note on her pillow, written in rough handwriting. "Stay inside. Don't be a hero." See, she crumpled it in her fist. Downstairs, the street was eerily quiet. Most people had taken positions, on rooftops, behind barricades, inside buildings with guns trained on the empty road. Sheriff Garrett had posted lookouts on the edge of town, watching for dust clouds. The waiting was worse than the fear. Elena checked her pistol for the third time. Loaded. 6 bullets. She had a shotgun behind the counter too, her father's old 12-gauge. Hadn't fired it in years, but muscle memory was a strange thing. The clock on the wall ticked toward 7. Then someone shouted from the north end of town. "Riders! They're coming!" Elena's heart kicked into overdrive. She moved to the window, peering through a gap in the boards Coulter had insisted on putting up. At first she saw nothing. Then, slowly, they appeared. 15 men on horseback, riding in a loose line down Main Street. They moved slowly, deliberately, like they had all the time in the world. The man in the lead was bigger than the others, broad-shouldered, wearing a black duster that flapped in the breeze. Even from a distance, Elena could feel the violence radiating off him. Jacob Braddock. The gang stopped in the middle of the street, right in front of the bank. Braddock dismounted, taking his time, making a show of it. He turned in a slow circle, surveying the silent town. "Silver Creek," his voice boomed across the empty street. "I know you're hiding. I know you're scared. That's smart. We're here for the Army payroll, and we're going to take it. You can hand it over peaceful, or we can burn this town to ash and take it anyway. Your choice." Silence. Braddock laughed. "That's what I thought. Cowards." He turned to his men. "Check the bank. Kill anyone." A gunshot cracked from the hotel roof. One of the outlaws jerked backward off his horse, blood exploding from his chest. He hit the ground and didn't move. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Then all hell broke loose. The gang scattered, pulling weapons, returning fire at the rooftops. More shots rang out from the church steeple, the saloon, the general store across from Elena's. 2 more outlaws went down. The rest took cover behind their horses, behind water troughs, anywhere they could find. Elena watched Braddock dive behind a wagon, shouting orders. He looked furious, surprised. He hadn't expected resistance. Coulter had been right. The gunfight turned into chaos fast. Bullets tore through wood and glass. Someone screamed. One of the outlaws threw a torch at the saloon, and flames started climbing up the side. Men were shouting, reloading, firing blind. The air filled with smoke and the smell of gunpowder. Elena saw Coulter on the roof of the building next to hers, firing methodically, each shot deliberate. He dropped another outlaw, then had to roll behind the false front as return fire chewed up the wood where he'd been standing. The gang was pinned down but not beaten. They started moving, using the chaos as cover, splitting up to flank the defenders. 2 of them broke toward Elena's store. She grabbed the shotgun. The first outlaw kicked in her back door just as Elena swung around the corner. She fired without thinking. The blast caught him center mass and threw him backward into the alley. The noise was deafening. Her ears rang. The second outlaw came through the door before she could reload. Young, maybe 20, with wild eyes and a gun already raised. They stared at each other for half a heartbeat. Then Elena swung the shotgun like a club. It connected with his jaw with a crack that made her stomach turn. He went down hard, gun skittering across the floor. Elena kicked it away, then stood there, shaking, the empty shotgun still in her hands. The young outlaw wasn't moving. She backed away, breathing hard, trying not to look at the body in the doorway, trying not to think about what she'd just done. Outside, the gunfire intensified. Elena reloaded the shotgun with trembling hands and moved back to the window. The street was carnage. At least 6 outlaws were down, maybe more. But the gang wasn't retreating. Braddock had rallied his remaining men, and they were pushing forward, firing at anything that moved. One of them shot Sheriff Garrett off the roof of the courthouse. Elena watched him fall, watched him hit the street and not get up, and felt something cold settle in her chest. They were losing. Then Coulter did something insane. He jumped off the roof, landed hard, rolled, came up shooting. Dropped one outlaw, then another. Moved like he'd done this 1,000 times, like the chaos didn't touch him. He was heading straight for Braddock. Elena's blood turned to ice. "No, no, no, no!" Braddock saw him coming. His face split into a vicious grin. "Coulter Hayes, I knew you were here, you son of a bitch!" He raised his gun. Coulter fired first, but Braddock was already moving, diving behind cover. The bullet sparked off the wagon wheel. Braddock popped up, returned fire, and Coulter took a hit. Elena saw him stagger, saw blood, and her heart stopped. He didn't go down. Coulter fired again, and this time the bullet found its mark. Braddock grunted, grabbed his shoulder, and fell back. But before Coulter could finish him, 2 more outlaws came around the corner, guns blazing. Coulter was caught in the open. Nowhere to hide. He spun, firing at both of them, and managed to drop one, but the other's bullet caught him in the leg. This time he went down. Elena didn't think. She ran. Out the front door, into the street, straight into the gunfight. Bullets kicked up dirt around her feet. Someone shouted her name. She didn't stop. Coulter was trying to get up, bleeding from at least 2 wounds, and the remaining outlaw was advancing on him, raising his gun for the killing shot. Elena fired the shotgun. The blast took the outlaw in the side and spun him around. He fell, screaming, clutching the wound. She reached Coulter, grabbed his arm. Get up, get up. What the hell are you doing out here? He was furious, bleeding, barely able to stand. Saving your life, you're welcome. Another shot rang out, close enough that Elena felt the air move. She looked up and saw Braddock on his feet, gun raised, aimed directly at her. Coulter shoved her behind him. The world seemed to slow down. Braddock fired. Coulter fired. 2 guns? 2 bullets? No cover. Then the cavalry scout, the one who'd brought the warning, appeared from nowhere and put a bullet in Braddock's head. The outlaw leader dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The remaining gang members saw their leader go down and broke. They ran for their horses, firing wildly, desperate to escape. The defenders on the rooftops picked off 2 more before the rest made it out of town, riding hard for the hills. And then, just like that, it was over. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena knelt in the dirt beside Coulter, hands pressed against the wound in his side, trying to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me. Don't you dare!" "I'm fine," he said, even though he clearly wasn't. "You're shot." "I noticed." "This isn't funny." "Little bit funny." People were emerging from buildings, from hiding places, checking the bodies, putting out fires. The town was a disaster. Buildings burned. Blood stained the street. At least 4 townspeople were dead, maybe more. But they'd won. They'd survived. Coulter looked up at Elena, pale and bleeding and somehow still managing to look annoyed. "I told you to stay inside, and I ignored you. You could have been killed. So could you. That's different." "How?" "Because you—" He stopped, winced. "You matter." Elena felt tears burn her eyes. "So do you, you idiot." He reached up with a shaking hand and touched her face. "You saved my life. You saved mine first. That's not how it works." "It is now." Coulter looked at her like he wanted to argue, but he was losing too much blood to manage it. His eyes started to close. "No." Elena grabbed his face. "Stay awake. Look at me. Coulter, look at me." He did. Barely. "Help!" Elena screamed. "Somebody help!" People came running. Strong hands lifted Coulter, carried him toward the church where the makeshift hospital had been set up. Elena followed, covered in his blood, shaking so hard she could barely walk. She didn't leave his side. The church smelled like blood and fear, and the sharp tang of whiskey being used as disinfectant. Elena sat on a hard wooden pew, hands still shaking, watching the town doctor work on Coulter by lamplight. 3 other wounded men lay on makeshift cots nearby, groaning, being tended by women with steady hands and grim faces. Outside, the sun was barely past noon, but it felt like days had passed since the shooting started. Dr. Samuel Morris was 60 years old and had patched up more bullet wounds than he cared to remember, but even he looked rattled as he dug the slug out of Coulter's side. Coulter was conscious, barely, teeth gritted against the pain. He'd refused the laudanum they'd offered him, said he needed to stay alert in case any of the gang came back. Elena thought that was stupid, told him so. "You're being stupid," she said from her spot 10 feet away, where the doctor had banished her after she'd gotten in the way twice. Coulter's response was somewhere between a grunt and a laugh. "Noted. If you pass out from the pain, it's your own fault." "Also noted." Dr. Morris pulled the bullet free with a wet sound that made Elena's stomach lurch. He dropped it into a tin pan with a clink, then immediately started packing the wound with clean cloth. "Missed the important bits," he muttered. "You're lucky." "Don't feel lucky," Coulter managed. "Well, you're alive. That counts." Morris moved to the leg wound next, which was less serious. The bullet had gone clean through the meat of his thigh. "This one's going to hurt like hell for a few weeks, but you'll walk. Might limp. We'll see." "Great. Could be worse." Sheriff Garrett's dead. So's Bill Henderson and the Morrison boy. You've got a future. They don't. The words hung heavy in the air. Coulter closed his eyes briefly, and Elena saw the guilt wash over his face, saw him add 3 more names to whatever list he kept in his head. Morris finished bandaging him up, stood back, and wiped his bloody hands on a rag. Keep the wounds clean. Change the dressings twice a day. No whiskey, no riding, no heavy lifting for at least 2 weeks. Longer if you want to heal proper. I'll make sure he listens, Elena said. Both men looked at her. Coulter opened his mouth like he was going to argue, then seemed to think better of it. Fine. The doctor raised an eyebrow. That was easier than I expected. He knows I'll tie him to the bed if I have to, Elena said flatly. That got a surprised laugh out of Morris. Even Coulter almost smiled. I believe you would, the doctor said. He gathered his instruments, blood-stained and grim. I've got others to see to. Don't let him do anything stupid, Miss Mercer. I won't. After Morris left, Elena finally allowed herself to move closer. She sat on the edge of the cot, careful not to jostle Coulter's injuries. Up close, he looked worse than she'd realized. Pale, drawn, the kind of exhausted that went bone deep. You scared me, she said quietly. I know. I thought you were going to die. I thought so too. He reached for her hand, winced at the movement, but didn't stop. His fingers were cold. You shouldn't have come out there. We've been over this. I know, but I'm saying it anyway. He looked at her, and his eyes were serious, haunted. If Braddock had shot you instead of me, he didn't. But if he had, he didn't. Elena squeezed his hand. We're both alive. That's what matters. Coulter was quiet for a long moment, staring at their joined hands like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. You killed someone today. The words hit her like cold water. Elena looked down. 2 people. Maybe 3. I don't know if the one I hit with the shotgun butt survived. That's not what I meant. I meant the one in your store, the one you shot. She'd been trying very hard not to think about that, about the weight of the shotgun in her hands, the recoil, the way the man had flown backward like he was made of straw. I had to. I know. He was going to kill me. I know that too. So why does it feel like I did something wrong? Coulter shifted, trying to sit up more, and immediately regretted it. His face went white. Elena put a hand on his chest, holding him down. Don't move. You need to lie still before you tear your stitches. He settled back with a frustrated exhale. It doesn't feel wrong because it was wrong. It feels wrong because you're a good person. Good people feel guilty about killing even when they have to do it. Did you feel guilty the first time? Yes. And the second? Yes. And after that? Coulter looked at her, and she saw the truth written across his face before he said it. Less every time. Until one day I didn't feel anything at all. That's when I knew I'd gone too far. That's when I knew I needed to stop. Elena thought about that. About the cold efficiency with which he'd fought today. The way he'd moved through the chaos like it was choreographed. But you didn't stop. You came here. You fought. That's different. How? Because I was protecting something that mattered. The weight of those words settled between them. Elena wanted to ask what he meant, but she already knew, could see it in the way he was looking at her. A commotion outside interrupted the moment. Raised voices, the sound of horses. Elena stood quickly, heart jumping back into her throat. Are they back? No. Coulter was struggling to sit up again, and this time Elena didn't stop him. He grabbed the edge of the cot, pulled himself upright, face tight with pain. That's cavalry. Finally. He was right. Through the church windows, Elena could see blue uniforms. At least 20 soldiers, led by a stern-faced captain who looked deeply unhappy about arriving too late to be useful. They were talking to the deputy sheriff, Garrett's second in command, a young man named Pierce who looked overwhelmed by suddenly being in charge. They'll want to talk to you, Elena said. I know. Are you going to tell them the truth? About riding with the gang? Coulter was quiet. If they ask. And if they arrest you? Then they arrest me. Elena felt panic claw up her throat. Coulter, it's fine. It's not fine. You saved this town. If they take you away? Elena. He reached for her hand again, pulled her closer. Whatever happens, happens. I'm done running. Been running for 5 years. I'm tired. So you're just going to let them. I'm going to tell the truth. If that's enough, it's enough. If it's not, he shrugged, then winced. At least I'll know I tried. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was being an idiot, that the truth didn't matter as much as survival, that he couldn't just give up after everything they'd been through. But the look on his face stopped her. He'd made up his mind. And maybe, Elena thought, that was what bravery actually looked like. Not charging into gunfights or facing down killers, just deciding to stop running from who you were and what you'd done. The church door opened. Captain Warren Ellis stepped inside, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. He was a career soldier, probably late 40s, with the kind of bearing that said he'd seen combat and didn't suffer fools. His gaze landed on Coulter. "You're Hayes." It wasn't a question. "I am," Coulter said. "I'm told you organized the defense. I helped. My scout says you knew the Braddock gang's tactics, knew how they'd attack." Coulter didn't hesitate. "I rode with them 5 years ago, before I knew what kind of men they were. When I found out, I left. Took money they'd stolen and returned it to the people they'd hurt. Jacob Braddock swore he'd kill me for it. He's been hunting me ever since." Captain Ellis studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "So I heard. Also heard you could have run when you knew they were coming. Didn't. You stayed. Helped these people survive." "I did what I had to. Most men would have run. I'm not most men." "No." Ellis glanced at Elena, then back to Coulter. "You're not. Deputy Pierce tells me you personally killed or wounded at least 6 gang members, saved several lives, put yourself in the line of fire repeatedly." He paused. "That doesn't sound like a man running from his past." "I'm not anymore," Coulter said quietly. "Why not?" Coulter looked at Elena. "Found a reason to stop." The captain followed his gaze, understanding flickering across his face. When he looked back at Coulter, something in his expression had softened. "The Army has a file on you, Hayes, wanted for questioning in connection with several robberies. No charges filed because every witness we found said you returned the stolen property before we could recover it. One old woman in Kansas City said you gave her back her wedding ring and apologized for taking it in the first place." "I did. That's not standard outlaw behavior. I was never a very good outlaw." Ellis almost smiled. "No, I imagine you weren't." He straightened. "Far as I'm concerned, you helped stop a massacre here today. The Army's not looking to arrest heroes. Consider your record cleared. You've got a fresh start, Mr. Hayes. Try not to waste it." The relief that washed over Coulter's face was almost painful to watch. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank whoever taught you that some things are worth more than survival." Ellis turned to leave, then stopped. "We're taking the bodies back for burial. The payroll's been recovered. We'll post a garrison here for the next month in case any remaining gang members get ideas. After that, you're on your own." "We'll manage," Elena said. Ellis looked at her properly for the first time. "I believe you will, ma'am." Then he left, taking his soldiers with him. Elena sat back down on the cot, legs suddenly weak. "You're free." "I'm free," Coulter repeated, like he couldn't quite believe it. "You don't have to run anymore." "No." "You could stay, if you wanted to." He looked at her, and there was something vulnerable in his eyes, something uncertain. "Would you want that?" Elena leaned forward and kissed him. Not the desperate, frantic kiss from yesterday. Something softer, slower, a promise instead of a goodbye. When she pulled back, Coulter was smiling. Just barely, but it was there. "I'll take that as a yes," he said. "You're an idiot." "Yeah, and you're still not allowed to move for at least a week." "I know. And when you do recover, you're helping me rebuild my store." "Wasn't planning on doing anything else." Elena felt something warm and bright bloom in her chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope. Good. Outside, Silver Creek was beginning to pick up the pieces. The next week passed in a blur of exhaustion and recovery. The dead were buried. Sheriff Garrett, Bill Henderson, young Thomas Morrison, and a farmer named Jack Cole who'd taken a bullet defending his family. The whole town turned out for the funerals. Elena stood beside Coulter, who was leaning heavily on a crutch, and watched 4 coffins get lowered into the ground. It could have been so much worse. That's what everyone kept saying. Could have been worse. And it was true. The gang had numbered 15. Only 4 townspeople had died. In terms of pure numbers, Silver Creek had won decisively. But numbers didn't account for the weight of loss, didn't explain the empty spaces at dinner tables, didn't make the grief any easier to carry. Elena looked around at her neighbors, people she'd known her entire life, and saw how the battle had changed them, saw the way they moved differently now, more carefully, like they'd been reminded how fragile everything was. After the funerals, the real work began. Buildings needed repairs. The saloon had half burned before they got the fire out. The bank's front windows were shot to pieces. Elena's store had bullet holes in 3 walls and a door that didn't close properly anymore. The whole town looked like a war zone, because that's what it had been. Coulter, against strict orders from Dr. Morris and increasingly creative threats from Elena, insisted on helping. "I can hammer nails sitting down," he argued the 3rd day, when Elena found him on her front porch trying to repair the door frame one-handed. "You're supposed to be resting." "I've been resting for 3 days. I'm going insane." "Good. Insanity builds character." "Elena." "Coulter." They stared at each other. Then Coulter held up the hammer. "I'm helping. You can either accept that or tie me up, and we both know you're not going to tie me up." "Don't tempt me." But she let him help, partly because she knew he was going out of his mind lying around doing nothing, and partly because she needed the help. The store wasn't going to fix itself, and she couldn't do it alone. They worked side by side in the late June heat, sweating, arguing about the right way to patch a wall, trying not to think too hard about the bloodstains they were covering up. Other people stopped by to help too. Margaret Chen and her brother brought food. The blacksmith, whose son Coulter had saved, insisted on replacing the damaged hinges for free. Even Sarah Ann Beckman showed up, which surprised Elena until she realized the girl just wanted to stare at Coulter. "Does she know you're spoken for?" Elena asked one evening after Sarah Ann had left, having contributed absolutely nothing useful. Coulter, who'd been focused on measuring a board, looked up. "Am I? Are you what?" "Spoken for." Elena felt heat rise to her face. I didn't mean because I'd like to be." He set down the measuring tape. "Spoken for. By you, if that's something you want." She stared at him. They'd been dancing around this for days, sleeping in separate rooms because Coulter was injured and it felt wrong to push for more, stealing glances when they thought the other wasn't looking, but neither of them had actually said it out loud. "You want to be spoken for," Elena said slowly. "By me." "Yes." "Why? Why?" He looked at her like she'd asked why the sky was blue. "Because I can't imagine leaving. Because every morning I wake up, and the first thing I think about is whether you're all right. Because you ran into a gunfight to save my life, and then had the audacity to yell at me for getting shot. Because—" He stopped. Started again. "Because I love you." The words hung in the air between them. Elena's heart was pounding so hard she was surprised he couldn't hear it. "You love me." "I do." "Since when?" "I don't know. Maybe since the first day I saw you sweeping the boardwalk. Maybe since you looked at me like I was worth more than the sum of my mistakes." "Does it matter?" "No." Elena crossed the space between them, careful of his injuries. "No, it doesn't matter." "So is that a—" She kissed him before he could finish the question. Kissed him like she'd wanted to for days, weeks, maybe since the moment he'd stood in the street facing down those drunk cowhands without flinching. Coulter's arms came around her, and for a moment the destroyed store and the broken town and everything else fell away. When they finally broke apart, Coulter was smiling, really smiling, the kind of expression that transformed his whole face. "I'm guessing that's a yes," he said. "You're guessing correctly." "Good." He pulled her closer, rested his forehead against hers. "Because I don't have a plan B." "Since when do you have a plan A?" "Fair point." They stood there in the ruins of her store, covered in sawdust and sweat, and Elena felt something settle inside her chest, something that felt like certainty, like inevitability, like coming home. "I love you too," she said quietly. In case that wasn't clear, Coulter's arms tightened around her. It was, but I liked hearing it anyway. Outside, the sun was setting. Someone was playing a fiddle somewhere down the street. Life was slowly returning to normal, or whatever normal looked like now. Silver Creek would survive. It always did. And so would they. Quote, 2 weeks after the battle, the cavalry garrison pulled out. Captain Ellis stopped by Elena's store before he left. Coulter was out back, working on replacing the steps, which gave the captain a chance to speak to Elena alone. He's a good man, Ellis said without preamble. Better than he thinks he is. I know, Elena replied. Take care of him. Men like that, men who've spent years running, sometimes they don't know how to stand still, how to accept that they deserve to be happy. I'll remind him. Ellis nodded, satisfied. I also wanted you to know, officially, the Army's report will say the Braddock gang was stopped by the citizens of Silver Creek acting in self-defense. Coulter Hayes' name will be mentioned as an organizer of the defense. Nothing about his past. Thank you. Don't thank me. He earned it. Ellis tipped his hat. Good luck, Miss Mercer. After he left, Elena stood in her repaired store and looked around. New boards on the walls, new glass in the windows. The bullet holes were gone, covered up, made invisible. But she knew where every single one had been, knew the exact spot where she'd stood when the first shot rang out, knew where Coulter had bled on her floor when they'd first brought him in. Some scars didn't show. Coulter appeared in the doorway, leaning less heavily on his crutch than he had last week. Garrison's gone, I saw. Feels strange, being on our own again. We were always on our own, I suppose. He looked around the store, taking in all the repairs. Looks good. It looks patched together, but it'll do. That's life on the frontier. Everything's patched together. You just hope the patches hold. Elena smiled. Philosophical today, are we? Dr. Morris says the pain makes me reflective. Dr. Morris is full of it. Coulter laughed. The sound still surprised her sometimes. How genuine it was, how unguarded. Like he was slowly remembering how to be human. They spent the rest of the day organizing inventory. Elena had lost some stock in the fight, broken jars, bullet-damaged goods, things that had been looted in the chaos, but most of it was salvageable. She was going through her father's old ledger, trying to reconcile the numbers, when she realized Coulter was watching her. What? She asked. Nothing, just... He paused. You're good at this. Running the store, taking care of people. You should be proud. I'm surviving. That's not the same thing. It is, though. He moved closer, sat down on the edge of the counter. You've kept this place going for 8 months on your own. Didn't fold when things got hard. Didn't run when the gang came. That's not just surviving. That's something more. Elena felt her throat tighten. My father would have done better. Maybe, but he's not here. You are. And you're doing fine. Fine isn't good enough. It's better than most people manage. She looked at him, at the quiet certainty in his eyes, and felt some of the weight she'd been carrying ease. You really believe that? I do. Even though I almost got you killed? You saved my life. Bit different. You wouldn't have been there if not for me, Elena. He reached over, took the ledger from her hands, set it aside. I was there because I wanted to be, because leaving would have meant losing something I wasn't willing to lose. That's not your fault. That's my choice. A stupid choice, maybe, but it's mine. They sat there in comfortable silence. Outside, the street was busy. People rebuilding, people moving forward, people choosing to stay despite everything. Silver Creek was still standing, battered and scarred, but standing, just like them. That night, Elena woke to the sound of Coulter shouting. She was out of bed in seconds, grabbing the pistol she now kept on her nightstand, a habit she hadn't had before the battle and probably wouldn't break any time soon. She rushed downstairs to where Coulter had been sleeping on a cot in the store's back room, the one she'd set up because he couldn't climb stairs yet. He was sitting up, breathing hard, eyes wide and unfocused. Not seeing her. Not seeing anything. Coulter. Elena approached carefully, gun lowered. Coulter, it's me. He didn't respond. Coulter. She touched his shoulder. He grabbed her wrist fast, his grip tight enough to hurt. For a second, she thought he was going to hurt her, thought whatever nightmare had him wasn't going to let go. Then his eyes focused. He saw her, really saw her. Elena. His voice was rough, broken. He let go of her wrist immediately, looked at his hand like it had betrayed him. I'm sorry, I wasn't. It's all right. It's not. I could have, but you didn't. She sat down beside him, rubbed her wrist where his fingers had been. It would bruise, but she didn't care. Bad dream? He laughed, bitter and humorless. Something like that. Want to talk about it? No. Want me to stay anyway? He looked at her, and in the dim lamplight she could see how shaken he was, how the walls he usually kept up had crumbled. Yes. Elena lay down beside him, careful not to jostle his injuries. He wrapped an arm around her, pulled her close, and she felt him shaking, not from cold, from something deeper. I killed a lot of people today, Coulter said quietly. In the fight, I keep seeing their faces. They were trying to kill you. I know, doesn't change what I did. Does it ever get easier? No. His hand moved up and down her arm, like he needed to feel her there, needed to confirm she was real. You just get better at living with it, or you don't. Some men drink themselves to death. Some men eat a bullet. Some men just... He stopped. Some men what? Some men find something worth staying alive for, something that makes the weight bearable. Elena pressed closer. Have you found that? I think so. Good. They lay there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the town settling. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere a baby cried. Normal sounds, peaceful sounds, the kind of sounds that said life was continuing despite everything. I love you, Coulter said suddenly, like he needed her to know, like he was afraid he wouldn't get another chance to say it. I know. I'm not easy to love. I'm broken, damaged. I've got more ghosts than any one person should carry. I don't care. You should, but I don't. Elena tilted her head to look at him. You think you're the only one with ghosts? I killed 2 people. Maybe 3. I can still feel the shotgun in my hands, still hear the sound it made when... She stopped. We're both carrying weight now. Maybe that's better. We can help each other carry it. Coulter looked at her like she'd said something profound. You're something else. Is that good or bad? Good. Definitely good. He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. Elena kissed him back and tried not to think about how easily they could have lost this, how close they'd come to never having this at all. When they finally pulled apart, Coulter's breathing had steadied. The tension had bled out of his shoulders. He was still haunted, probably always would be, but he looked more grounded, more present. Stay, he said quietly. I'm not going anywhere. I mean, he paused. Stay here, in Silver Creek, with me. Don't just... I need to know this is real, that you're not going to change your mind when things settle down and you realize what you've gotten yourself into. Elena propped herself up on one elbow. You think I'm going to change my mind? People do. I don't. You might. Coulter. She touched his face, made him look at her. I'm not going anywhere. I love you. I choose you, all of you. The good parts and the broken parts, and everything in between. That's not going to change just because the excitement's over. He studied her face like he was memorizing it. You mean that? I do. Why? Because you're worth it. Because you make me feel things I didn't think I could feel. Because when I'm with you, I'm not afraid anymore. She paused. And because I think you need someone to choose you for once, to tell you that you're enough exactly as you are. Coulter's eyes closed briefly. When he opened them again, they were bright with something that looked suspiciously like tears. I don't deserve you. Stop saying that. It's true. It's not. And even if it was, I don't care. Elena settled back down beside him. Now go to sleep. You need rest. Yes, ma'am. But he didn't sleep. Neither did she. They just lay there together, holding each other in the dark, and let the weight of everything they'd survived settle over them like a blanket. Outside, Silver Creek slept. Inside, 2 broken people tried to figure out how to be whole. By the time August arrived, the story of what happened in Silver Creek had spread across 3 territories. Elena heard different versions every time a new traveler passed through. In some tellings, Coulter Hayes single-handedly fought off 50 outlaws. In others, the entire Braddock gang had burned the town to ashes before a mysterious gunslinger rose from the dead to exact revenge. One particularly creative version claimed Elena herself had shot Jacob Braddock between the eyes from 200 yards while riding a horse backward. "That one's my favorite," Coulter said when she told him about it. He was finally off the crutch, though he still limped when he thought she wasn't watching. They were sitting on the porch of her store in the evening heat, watching the street settle into twilight. Very dramatic. Completely ridiculous. Most good stories are. Elena laughed despite herself. The past 6 weeks had been strange, rebuilding the town, rebuilding themselves, learning how to exist in a world where they weren't running from anything anymore. It should have been easier. In some ways it was. In other ways it was the hardest thing either of them had ever done. Coulter still had nightmares. Less frequent now, but they came. Elena would wake to find him sitting by the window, staring at nothing, gun in his lap. She'd learn not to startle him, learn to approach slowly, to speak softly, to give him space to come back to himself. She had her own moments. Sometimes a loud noise would send her heart racing. Sometimes she'd see a shadow move and reach for a weapon that wasn't there. Sometimes she'd be working in the store and suddenly remember the weight of the shotgun, the way it had kicked against her shoulder, the man falling backward into the alley. They didn't talk about it much, didn't need to. They just existed together in the aftermath, holding each other up. The town had started calling Coulter a hero. It made him deeply uncomfortable. "I'm not a hero," he'd said more than once, usually while someone was thanking him for saving their life, or their business, or their family. "I just did what needed doing." But the title stuck anyway. People asked his opinion on things, asked him to help settle disputes. The deputy sheriff, Pierce, who was barely 25 and clearly overwhelmed, started coming to Coulter for advice on everything from handling drunks to organizing patrols. Elena watched it happen and wondered if Coulter realized what was occurring. He was becoming part of the community, not just a drifter who happened to stay, a member of Silver Creek, someone people relied on, someone who belonged. One afternoon in mid-August, Deputy Pierce showed up at the store looking nervous. "Miss Mercer, Mr. Hayes, could I speak with you both for a moment?" Elena was restocking shelves. Coulter was in the back, fixing a loose floorboard that had been driving Elena crazy for weeks. They both stopped what they were doing. "What's wrong?" Coulter asked, immediately alert. "Old habits. Nothing's wrong. At least, I hope nothing's wrong." Pierce took off his hat, turned it in his hands. "The town council met yesterday. We've been talking about what to do now that Sheriff Garrett's gone. We need someone to fill the position." "Makes sense," Coulter said carefully. "You asking for recommendations?" "No, sir. I'm asking if you'd consider taking the job." The silence that followed was profound. Elena looked at Coulter, saw the shock ripple across his face, followed quickly by disbelief. "You're joking." "I'm not." Pierce looked earnest, young. "You're the best fighter we have. You know how to organize a defense. People respect you. The council voted unanimously. We want you to be sheriff." Coulter seemed at a complete loss. "I can't be sheriff." "Why not?" "Because I'm—" He stopped. Elena could see him scrambling for reasons. "I rode with outlaws. I've broken the law. I've killed people." "So have half the men in this town," Pierce said bluntly. "The frontier doesn't care much about where you've been, only where you're going, and right now we need someone who can keep Silver Creek safe. That's you." Coulter shook his head. "I'm not the right person." "Then who is?" No answer. Pierce pressed forward. "Look, I know I'm young. I know I don't have much experience, but I've been watching you these past weeks. You're good at this. You're patient with people. You don't jump to violence unless you have to. You think things through. That's what a sheriff needs to be." "What about you?" Elena asked. "You're already deputy." "I'm not ready. Maybe someday, but not now." Pierce looked at Coulter. "Will you at least think about it?" Coulter glanced at Elena. She could see the uncertainty in his eyes, the fear. "I need to talk to Elena. Can you give us a day?" "Take 2, Pierce said. He put his hat back on, nodded to both of them, and left. After he was gone, Coulter sat down heavily on a barrel of flour. They want me to be sheriff. I heard. Me. The man who rode with the Braddock gang. The man who stopped them, Elena corrected. She came over, stood in front of him. What do you think? I think it's insane. That's not what I asked. Coulter rubbed his face. I don't know what to think. A month ago I was ready to leave this town forever. Now they want me to protect it, to be responsible for it. You already are protecting it. That's different. How? Because I could leave any time. If I take this job, I'm saying I'm staying, for real. Not just because of you, because of everyone. Elena sat down beside him. Would that be so terrible? I don't know. He looked at her. What do you want? I want you to do what makes you happy. That's not an answer. Yes, it is. She took his hand. I want you here. You know I do. But not if you're going to spend every day wishing you were somewhere else. Not if this is going to make you miserable. Coulter was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. I've been running my whole life, since I was 16 years old, always moving, never staying anywhere longer than a few months. I told myself it was because I was looking for something, but really, I was just scared. Of what? Of stopping. Of putting down roots, he struggled for words, of mattering to people, because if you matter, you can disappoint them, can let them down, can lose them. You're afraid of loss. I'm terrified of loss. He squeezed her hand. But I'm more terrified of losing you, of waking up one day and realizing I let fear make my decisions for me, that I ran away from the only good thing I've ever had because I was too scared to reach for it. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. So what are you saying? I'm saying, he took a deep breath. I'm saying I want to stay. Want to try. Don't know if I'll be any good at being sheriff. Don't know if I can handle the responsibility, but I want to try. Then try. What if I fail? Then you fail. Elena moved closer. But at least you'll have tried. That's more than most people can say. Coulter pulled her into his arms, held her tight. How did I get this lucky? You didn't. You just stopped running long enough to let luck catch up. He laughed, and it was the best sound Elena had heard in weeks. The next day, Coulter Hayes accepted the position of sheriff of Silver Creek. The town threw a celebration that night at the rebuilt saloon. It wasn't much. Whiskey and beer, some music from a traveling musician who'd gotten stranded in town, people dancing in the street. But it felt important. Felt like Silver Creek was claiming its future instead of just surviving its past. Elena stood at the edge of the crowd, watching Coulter try to navigate the attention. People kept buying him drinks, shaking his hand, clapping him on the back. He looked overwhelmed and slightly panicked, which she found deeply amusing. Sarah Ann Beckman appeared beside her, holding a glass of wine. He's really staying. He is, Elena said carefully. She and Sarah Ann hadn't spoken much since the battle. The girl had stopped coming by the store, stopped making excuses to see Coulter. Elena had assumed she'd moved on. Apparently not. I wanted to apologize, Sarah Ann said suddenly, for how I acted before. I was jealous and petty, and I said things I shouldn't have. Elena looked at her, surprised. It's forgotten. No, it's not. But thank you for saying so. Sarah Ann watched Coulter across the crowd. I thought I wanted him because he was handsome and mysterious, but I didn't actually want him. I just wanted the idea of him. You know the difference? I do. You actually know him. The real him. The broken parts and the good parts. She turned to Elena. He's lucky to have you. I think I'm lucky to have him. That too. Sarah Ann smiled, and for the first time Elena saw genuine warmth in it. I hope you'll both be happy. After she left, Elena felt something ease in her chest. Forgiveness wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was just a quiet conversation and a willingness to let go. Coulter found her eventually, pulling her away from the crowd. Dance with me. You hate dancing. I hate crowds. Dancing with you is different. They moved into the street where others were swaying to the music. Coulter held her carefully, mindful of the people watching, but there was something in his eyes that made Elena's heart race. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For believing I could do this. Be this. He glanced around at the town, at the people celebrating. I wouldn't have said yes if not for you. Yes, you would have. Maybe, but it wouldn't have meant as much. They danced in silence for a moment. The music was simple, the steps basic, but Elena felt like they were the only two people in the world. I need to tell you something, Coulter said suddenly. Elena's stomach dropped. That sounds ominous. It's not. At least, I don't think it is. He took a breath. The council wants me to move into the sheriff's house. It's been empty since Garrett died. They're offering it as part of the job. That makes sense. It's a real house, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a porch. He paused. Room for a family, if someone wanted that. Elena's heart started pounding. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I don't know. What do you think I'm asking? Coulter. All right. He stopped dancing, took both her hands. I'm asking if you'd consider moving in with me, as my wife. If you'd marry me. The street seemed to fall away. The music kept playing, but Elena couldn't hear it anymore. All she could hear was her own heartbeat and Coulter's breathing and the weight of what he'd just said. You want to marry me, she said slowly. I do. I know it's fast. I know we haven't known each other that long. But I also know I don't want to spend another day pretending this isn't permanent. Pretending I'm going to leave eventually. I'm not leaving. I'm staying. And I want to stay with you. Elena felt tears spill over. You're serious? I'm serious. You really want to marry me? Elena, I'd marry you right now if there was someone here who could do it. He cupped her face in his hands. I love you. I want to build a life with you. Want to wake up next to you every morning and know that you're mine and I'm yours. Want to... He stopped, voice cracking. Want to stop being afraid of losing you. You're not going to lose me. Then marry me. Elena laughed through her tears. That's not much of a proposal. I know. I'm terrible at this. You are. So is that a no? That's a yes, you idiot. Coulter's face transformed. Pure joy, pure relief. He kissed her right there in the middle of the street, in front of everyone, and the crowd erupted in cheers. When they finally broke apart, Elena was grinning like a fool. You realize everyone's watching. Don't care. They're going to talk about this for weeks. Good. Let them. He pulled her close again. I'm done hiding. Done pretending I don't need people. Done running. Elena rested her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong. Around them, Silver Creek celebrated. And for the first time since her father died, Elena felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. They were married 3 weeks later in front of the rebuilt church. It wasn't a big ceremony. Frontier weddings rarely were. The traveling preacher happened to be passing through. Most of the town showed up. Margaret Chen made Elena a dress from fabric she'd been saving for something special. The blacksmith's wife baked a cake. Someone brought flowers from their garden. Elena stood at the front of the church in her new dress, holding a bouquet of wildflowers, and watched Coulter walk toward her. He was wearing his only suit, looking uncomfortable and nervous and perfect. When he reached her, he took her hands and smiled. You look beautiful, he said quietly. You look terrified. I am terrified. Of what? Of waking up and finding out this isn't real. The preacher cleared his throat. Should we begin? Elena squeezed Coulter's hands. We should definitely begin. The ceremony was simple. The vows were traditional. But when Coulter said, I do, his voice cracked. And when Elena said the same, she meant it with every fiber of her being. They were pronounced husband and wife. Coulter kissed her like he was sealing a promise. And in that moment, Elena knew with absolute certainty that everything they'd survived, the fear, the violence, the loss, had been worth it. Because it had led them here. The celebration afterward was louder than the one when Coulter became sheriff. People drank and danced and told stories. Someone started a bonfire in the street. Children ran around chasing each other while their parents laughed. Elena and Coulter slipped away early, escaping to the sheriff's house that was now officially theirs. It was small but solid, with real furniture and curtains on the windows, and a bed that didn't creak when you moved. This is ours, Coulter said, looking around like he couldn't quite believe it. An actual house. Our house, Elena corrected. Our house. He tested the words, smiled. I like that. They stood in the middle of the living room, still dressed in their wedding clothes, and just looked at each other. We're married, Elena said. We are. That's strange. Good strange or bad strange? Good strange. She moved closer. I'm married to the most dangerous man in Colorado Territory. Former dangerous man. Current sheriff. That too. Coulter pulled her into his arms. How did we get here? I have no idea. I tried so hard to stay away from you. I know. Didn't work. I noticed. He laughed, and Elena felt it rumble through his chest. I'm glad it didn't work. Me too. They kissed, slower this time, without the audience and the pressure. Just two people who'd found each other against all odds and decided to stay. Later, lying in their new bed in their new house, Elena traced the scars on Coulter's chest. He had so many. Some from the battle, others older, each one a story he'd never fully told her. Do they hurt? She asked. Not anymore. Just reminders. Of what? Of who I was. Who I am. Who I want to be. He covered her hand with his. I used to hate these scars. Used to think they made me ugly. Broken. You're not broken. Maybe not. He looked at her. Or maybe I am, and you just love me anyway. That's closer to the truth. Coulter smiled. You're ruthlessly honest. Someone has to be. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in years, neither of them had nightmares. The next few months passed quickly. Coulter settled into his role as sheriff better than anyone expected. He was fair but firm, handling everything from cattle disputes to drunk miners with the same steady patience. People learned quickly that testing him was a bad idea. He might be reformed, but he was still dangerous when he needed to be. Elena ran the store with increasing confidence. The battle had destroyed some of her inventory, but it had also brought new business. Travelers stopped in Silver Creek specifically to see where the famous gunfight had happened. Some of them bought supplies. Some just wanted to hear the story. Elena usually let Coulter tell it, since he was better at leaving out the parts that made them both sound insane. They fell into a rhythm. Work during the day, dinner together every evening, quiet nights on the porch, watching the town settle. It was normal. Domestic. Everything Coulter had spent his life running from. And he loved it. I never thought I'd be happy, he admitted one night in October. They were sitting by the fire, Elena reading while Coulter cleaned his gun. Never thought I deserved it. Do you think you deserve it now? I don't know, but I'm going to try to earn it anyway. Elena set down her book. You already have. Winter came early that year. By November, snow was falling, blanketing Silver Creek in white. The town slowed down, people staying inside, conserving supplies. Elena's store became a gathering place, somewhere warm where people could socialize, trade stories, wait out the cold. Coulter spent most of his time making rounds, checking on families, making sure everyone had enough food and firewood. He took the responsibility seriously, more seriously than Elena had expected. You're a good sheriff, she told him one particularly cold night. I'm adequate. You're good. If you say so. I do say so. Elena moved closer on the couch, tucked herself against his side. The town's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have the town. And me. Especially you. He kissed the top of her head. How did I get so lucky? You stopped running. Best decision I ever made. They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn. Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, they were warm and safe and together. And that was enough. In December, Elena realized she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks, but hadn't said anything. Wanted to be sure, wanted to find the right moment. But when she finally told Coulter, there was no perfect moment. She just blurted it out one morning over breakfast. I'm pregnant. Coulter dropped his fork. You're... what? Pregnant, going to have a baby. Our baby. He stared at her. Then his face split into the widest smile she'd ever seen. We're having a baby. We are. When? July, probably. Maybe August. Coulter stood up so fast he knocked over his chair. He came around the table, pulled Elena into his arms, and held her like she was made of glass. "We're having a baby. You already said that." "I know. I'm just—" He pulled back to look at her. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." "How do you feel?" "Terrified. Excited. Nauseous." "Nauseous?" "Mornings are rough. Why didn't you tell me?" "I am telling you." "I mean earlier. I wanted to be sure." Elena touched his face. "Are you happy?" "Happy?" Coulter laughed. "Elena, I don't even have words. I never let myself imagine." He stopped, voice thick. "Yes, I'm happy. So happy I don't know what to do with it." "Well, you have about 7 months to figure it out." They told the town the following week. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. People brought gifts, baby clothes, toys, advice. The blacksmith started building a crib. Margaret Chen began sewing blankets. Even Sarah Ann stopped by with a small stuffed bear she'd made. "For the baby," she said, handing it to Elena. "May he or she have better taste in men than I did." Elena laughed. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Sarah Ann glanced at Coulter, who was outside talking to Deputy Pierce. "He's going to be a good father." "I think so too." "He's lucky he found you." "We're lucky we found each other." Winter deepened. The town hunkered down, and Elena and Coulter prepared for the spring that would bring new life into a world they'd fought so hard to protect. One night in late January, they sat together by the fire, Elena's hand resting on her still flat stomach. "What do you think?" Coulter asked. "Boy or girl?" "Does it matter?" "No, just curious." "I think—" Elena paused. "I think either way, they're going to have the best father they could ask for." Coulter looked at her, eyes bright. "I'm going to try. Going to be better than my father was. Better than I thought I could be." "You already are. You have a lot of faith in me. Someone has to." He pulled her closer, and they sat there watching the flames dance. Outside, snow fell. Inside, they planned a future neither of them had thought they'd live to see. And somewhere in the back of both their minds, the ghosts of what they'd survived quietly faded, replaced by something brighter, something that looked a lot like hope. Spring came to Silver Creek like a promise kept. The snow melted slowly through March and April, revealing a town that had somehow survived another Colorado winter. The buildings stood solid, the people endured, and Elena's belly grew round with new life that kicked and turned like it was already impatient to meet the world. Coulter had become almost comically protective. He wouldn't let her lift anything heavier than a broom, insisted she sit down every hour, followed her around like a nervous shadow until Elena finally snapped at him one afternoon in late May. "I'm pregnant, not dying." "I know that." "Then stop treating me like I'm made of porcelain." "I'm just trying to—" "Smother me. You're trying to smother me." She was restocking shelves in the store, moving slower than usual but still capable. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I'm going to be fine." Coulter leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "What if something goes wrong?" "Then something goes wrong. We'll deal with it." "Elena." "Coulter." She turned to face him. "I love that you care. I love that you're worried. But if you don't stop hovering, I'm going to lose my mind. I need you to trust that I know my own body, that I'll tell you if something's wrong. Can you do that?" He looked torn, miserable, finally nodded. "I can try. That's all I'm asking." But she understood where the fear came from, understood that every time Coulter looked at her, he saw something precious he was terrified of losing. He'd lost too much already. His brother, his past, years of his life to running and fear. Now he had something worth keeping, and the thought of losing it was eating him alive. Elena tried to be patient, tried to remember that his worry came from love, not control. But some days it was harder than others. Deputy Pierce helped by keeping Coulter busy. There were disputes to settle, patrols to run, the usual chaos that came with frontier life. A group of miners got into a fight over a claim. A traveling merchant accused someone of theft. 2 families nearly came to blows over a property line. Coulter handled it all with the steady patience that had become his trademark. He didn't jump to violence, didn't lose his temper, just listened, thought it through, made decisions that were usually fair even when they made people angry. "You're good at this," Deputy Pierce said one afternoon after Coulter had successfully mediated a particularly ugly dispute. "Better than Sheriff Garrett was, if I'm being honest." Coulter looked uncomfortable. Garrett was a good man. He was, but he was also set in his ways. You actually listen to people. Try to understand both sides. That matters. Just trying not to make things worse. Well, it's working. Pierce adjusted his hat. Town's lucky to have you. After he left, Coulter stood in the middle of the street and looked around at Silver Creek. The buildings, the people, the place he'd never intended to stay but now couldn't imagine leaving. Something had shifted in him over the past year, something fundamental. He wasn't the man who'd ridden into town chasing ghosts and running from his past. That man had been hollow, purposeless, waiting for the next disaster to confirm what he already believed about himself, that he was worthless, that he destroyed everything he touched, that he was better off alone. But that man was gone. Or maybe not gone, maybe just transformed. All the broken pieces reassembled into something that could function, could love, could build instead of destroy. He walked back to the store and found Elena resting in the back room, one hand on her belly. She opened her eyes when he came in. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Everything's fine." He sat down beside her, just thinking. About what? About how different my life is now. How different I am. Elena smiled. "You're not that different." "Yes, I am. A year ago I would have run from all of this. From you. From the baby. From responsibility. Would have convinced myself I was protecting you by leaving. But you didn't. No, I stayed." He took her hand. "Because you made me believe I was worth staying for. That I could be more than what I'd been. That my past didn't have to define my future. I didn't make you believe anything. I just saw what was already there. Maybe, but you were the first person who bothered to look." He leaned down and kissed her stomach. "This baby is going to have a good life. I'm going to make sure of it." "We're going to make sure of it," Elena corrected. "We." He smiled. "I'm still getting used to that word. Better get used to it fast. In about 2 months, he becomes 3. The thought still terrified him, still filled him with a kind of fear he'd never experienced before. But underneath the fear was something else, something that felt suspiciously like joy. Elena went into labor on a sweltering afternoon in late July. She was in the store when her water broke, standing behind the counter, helping a customer. The woman took one look at the puddle forming on the floor and started screaming for help. Within minutes, half the town seemed to know. Coulter came running from the sheriff's office, white-faced and panicking. Are you? "I'm fine." Elena gripped the counter, breathing through a contraction. "But you need to get Dr. Morris. Now." He ran. The next several hours were a blur of pain and fear and determination. Dr. Morris arrived and took charge, ordering everyone out except for Margaret Chen, who'd delivered 3 babies of her own and knew what she was doing. They moved Elena upstairs to the bedroom, got her into bed, and the real work began. Labor was nothing like Elena had imagined. It was harder, longer, more exhausting than anything she'd ever experienced. The pain came in waves that left her gasping and sweating and wondering if she was going to survive this. Downstairs, Coulter was wearing a hole in the floor, pacing. Deputy Pierce had tried to get him to leave, to go do something useful, but he'd refused. Just kept pacing and listening to Elena's screams from above and looking like he was being torn apart. "She's strong," Pierce said, trying to be helpful. "She'll be fine." "You don't know that. Women do this all the time. That doesn't mean it's safe." "Coulter, I can't lose her." The words came out raw, desperate. "I can't. If something happens..." "Nothing's going to happen." But neither of them knew that for sure. Frontier childbirth was dangerous. Women died. Babies died. It was a fact of life on the edge of civilization. Upstairs, Elena was thinking the same thing, thinking that she might not survive this, that her baby might not survive this, that Coulter might end up alone after all, raising a child without her or mourning both of them. "I can't do this," she gasped between contractions. "Yes, you can," Margaret said firmly. "You're almost there." "I can't..." "Elena Mercer Hayes, you fought off the Braddock gang with a shotgun. You can sure as hell push out a baby." That surprised a laugh out of her. Then another contraction hit and she stopped laughing. The sun was setting when the baby finally came. One last push, one last scream, and suddenly there was crying. Not Elena's crying, a baby's crying. "It's a girl," Dr. Morris announced. "A healthy girl." Elena collapsed back against the pillows, sobbing with relief. Margaret cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a blanket, then placed her in Elena's arms. She was tiny, red-faced, perfect. "Hi," Elena whispered. "Hi, sweetheart." The baby stopped crying and looked at her with unfocused eyes. Elena felt her heart crack open in a way she hadn't known was possible. "Someone should tell Coulter," she said, not looking up from her daughter's face. Margaret went to the door and called down. "It's a girl! Mother and baby are both fine!" The sound of Coulter's boots on the stairs was like thunder. He burst into the room, wild-eyed and terrified and hopeful all at once. When he saw Elena holding the baby, he stopped dead. Are you—" "We're fine," Elena smiled through her tears. "Come meet your daughter." He crossed the room slowly, like he was afraid any sudden movement would shatter the moment. When he reached the bed, he just stood there staring at the tiny bundle in Elena's arms. "She's so small," he said finally. "She's perfect. Can I—" "Of course." Elena carefully transferred the baby to Coulter's arms. He held her like she was made of glass, like one wrong move would break her. The baby yawned. Coulter made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "Hi," he said softly. "I'm your father. I'm going to try to be good at this. Can't promise I'll be perfect. Can't promise I won't make mistakes. But I promise I'll love you. I promise I'll protect you. I promise—" His voice broke. "I promise I'll never leave you." Elena watched him with tears streaming down her face. Watched this man who'd been so convinced he was broken, so certain he didn't deserve happiness, hold his daughter like she was the most precious thing in the world. Because she was. Dr. Morris cleared his throat. "You should let Elena rest. She's had a hard day." Coulter looked up, seemed to remember there were other people in the room. "Right. Yes." He carefully handed the baby back to Elena, then leaned down and kissed them both. "I love you, both of you, so much." "We love you too," Elena said. After everyone left, Elena lay in bed holding her daughter and felt something settle inside her chest. Peace. Contentment. The absolute certainty that everything she'd survived, all the fear and pain and loss, had been worth it to reach this moment. They named her Grace. Assun. The first few months of parenthood were chaos. Grace was a fussy baby. She cried at night, slept during the day, and seemed determined to ensure neither of her parents got more than 2 hours of sleep at a time. Coulter was surprisingly good with her despite his initial terror. He learned to change diapers without gagging, learned to rock her to sleep, learned the difference between her hungry cry and her tired cry, and her "I'm screaming because I can cry." Elena was exhausted. Her body took longer to recover than she'd expected. The store needed attention, the house needed attention, the baby needed constant attention. Some days she felt like she was drowning. "I don't know how people do this," she said one particularly rough night. Grace had been crying for 2 hours straight. Nothing worked. Elena was sitting on the floor of the nursery, rocking her daughter and crying herself. Coulter found her there and knelt down beside them. "Give her to me." "She won't stop crying." "I know. Give her to me anyway." Elena handed Grace over and watched Coulter walk the room, bouncing slightly, making soft, shushing sounds. After a few minutes, miraculously, Grace quieted. Then she fell asleep against his shoulder. "How did you do that?" Elena asked, exhausted and amazed. "I have no idea." Coulter looked down at his sleeping daughter. "Maybe she likes my voice. Or maybe you're magic." "Definitely not magic, just stubborn, like her mother." Elena laughed despite her exhaustion. "Can you put her down?" "I'm afraid to move." "You're going to have to eventually." Very carefully, Coulter placed Grace in her crib. She stirred but didn't wake. They both held their breath. When she stayed asleep, they tiptoed out of the room like thieves. In their own bedroom, they collapsed on the bed fully clothed. "Is it always this hard?" Elena asked. "I don't know. I've never done this before." "Me neither. We're terrible at this. We're learning." Slowly, Elena turned her head to look at him. Do you regret it? Regret what? This. All of it. Staying, getting married, having a baby, taking on responsibility you never asked for. Coulter rolled onto his side to face her properly. Are you serious? Yes. Elena, I regret nothing. Not one single thing. These past months have been the hardest and the best of my entire life. I'm exhausted. I'm terrified. I have no idea what I'm doing. But I wake up every morning next to you, and I go check on our daughter, and I walk through a town that actually wants me here, and I think... He paused. I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Even on the bad days? Especially on the bad days, because I spent years having bad days alone. And this, having someone to share them with, makes all the difference. She reached over and took his hand. I'm glad you stayed. I'm glad you wouldn't let me leave. I'm very stubborn. Yes, you are. It's one of my favorite things about you. They fell asleep like that, holding hands, too tired to even undress properly. Down the hall, Grace slept peacefully, unaware that she was the reason two broken people had finally figured out how to be whole. By the time Grace was 6 months old, Silver Creek had settled into a new normal. The story of the Braddock gang had faded into legend. New families moved in, old families stayed. The town grew slowly, steadily, the way frontier towns did when they decided they were going to survive. Coulter had been sheriff for over a year now. People no longer called him the mysterious gunslinger or the dangerous drifter. They just called him Sheriff Hayes. He'd earned it, earned their trust, earned the right to be part of something bigger than himself. Elena ran the store with Grace strapped to her back in a sling Margaret Chen had made. The baby watched everything with curious eyes, babbling at customers, charming everyone who came through the door. Business was good, better than it had been when her father was alive, though Elena tried not to think about that too much, tried not to feel guilty about succeeding where he'd struggled. One afternoon in early spring, a stranger rode into town. Coulter was in his office when Deputy Pierce came running. Sheriff, we've got a problem. Coulter looked up from his paperwork. What kind of problem? There's a man asking questions about you, about the battle, about the Braddock gang. Everything in Coulter went cold. What kind of man? Says he's a bounty hunter. Says there's still a warrant out for you in Kansas. Says he's here to collect. For a moment, Coulter couldn't breathe. The past he'd thought was buried was suddenly right outside his door. Where is he? Saloon. Coulter stood up, checked his gun, and walked out into the street. Pierce followed. So did several other townspeople who'd heard the commotion. The bounty hunter was exactly what Coulter expected, hard-faced, cold-eyed. The kind of man who made a living dragging people back to face justice, whether they deserved it or not. You Coulter Hayes? The man asked. I am. I'm taking you in. On what charge? Armed robbery, Kansas City, 5 years ago. You and the Braddock gang hit a bank. 3 people died. Coulter felt the bottom drop out of his world. I wasn't part of that robbery. I'd already left the gang. That's not what the warrant says. The warrant's wrong. That's for a judge to decide. The bounty hunter stood up, hand on his gun. You come in peaceful? Coulter's mind raced. He could fight, could draw faster than this man could blink, could end this right here. But that would make him exactly what the bounty hunter claimed he was. A killer, an outlaw, everything he'd been trying not to be. Wait, Deputy Pierce stepped forward. Sheriff Hayes has been cleared by the U.S. Army. Captain Ellis himself said his record was clean. Army jurisdiction doesn't extend to state crimes. The bounty hunter didn't look away from Coulter. Last chance. Come peaceful, or I take you by force. The saloon had gone silent. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what Coulter would do. Elena appeared in the doorway of the store, Grace in her arms. She saw the confrontation, and her face went white. Coulter looked at her, at his daughter, at the life he'd built. Then he looked at the bounty hunter and raised his hands. I'll go peaceful. The protest was immediate. People shouting, Deputy Pierce arguing, someone running to get Dr. Morris like he could help somehow. But Coulter shook his head. It's all right. I'll go. I'll face the charges. If I'm innocent, the court will prove it. And if they don't? Elena's voice cut through the noise. Coulter looked at her. Then at least I went down doing the right thing. The bounty hunter cuffed him, started walking him toward his horse. The crowd followed, angry and helpless. Elena handed Grace to Margaret Chen and ran after them. "Wait, how long will this take?" "Depends on the trial," the bounty hunter said without stopping. "Where are you taking him?" "Kansas City. That's 3 weeks' travel. More like 4. Elena felt panic claw up her throat. "I'm coming with you." "No, you're not," Coulter said firmly. "You've got Grace. You've got the store. You can't." "I can, and I will." "Elena, don't argue with me." She grabbed his arm, cuffed as it was. "We've been through worse than this. We'll get through this too." The bounty hunter looked between them, then shrugged. "Suit yourself. But you're keeping up or getting left behind." They left that afternoon. Elena arranged for Margaret to watch Grace and run the store. Deputy Pierce promised to hold down the fort. Half the town came out to see them off, which seemed to unsettle the bounty hunter considerably. "Your sheriff's popular," he muttered. "He's a good man," someone in the crowd said. "We'll see about that." The ride to Kansas City was long and miserable. The bounty hunter kept Coulter cuffed the entire time, sleeping or not. Elena rode beside them, silent and furious and terrified. At night, when the bounty hunter was asleep, she'd move closer to Coulter. "This is going to be all right," she'd whisper. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do, because you didn't do what they're accusing you of. The truth will come out." "The truth doesn't always matter." "It will this time." She reached through the darkness to touch his hand. "Have faith." "I don't have much of that." "Then borrow mine." 3 weeks later, they reached Kansas City. Coulter was thrown in jail to await trial. Elena found a boarding house and waited. The trial was scheduled for 2 weeks out. Elena spent that time gathering evidence, talking to anyone who would listen, writing letters to Captain Ellis and anyone else who might help. She was relentless, driven, refusing to accept that Coulter might be taken from her after everything they'd survived. On the day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Elena sat in the front row, hands folded, face carefully blank. The prosecutor laid out the case. 3 people dead in a bank robbery. The Braddock gang responsible. Coulter Hayes was a known member. Therefore, he was guilty. The defense attorney, a young man Elena had paid almost everything she had, argued that Coulter had left the gang before the robbery, that he'd been in a different territory entirely when it happened, that there was no evidence placing him at the scene. The prosecutor produced a witness, a man who claimed he'd seen Coulter at the bank that day. Elena's heart sank. Then the defense called their own witness, Captain Warren Ellis, in full uniform, who testified that Coulter Hayes had saved Silver Creek from the remnants of the Braddock gang, that he'd been cleared by the Army, that he was a hero. The prosecutor objected, said it was irrelevant. The judge disagreed. More witnesses came forward. People from Silver Creek who'd traveled all the way to Kansas City to testify. The blacksmith whose son Coulter had saved, Deputy Pierce, even Dr. Morris. They told the story of a man who'd made mistakes but was trying to be better. A man who'd risked his life to protect people who'd been strangers to him. A man who deserved a second chance. The prosecutor's witness crumbled under cross-examination. Admitted he'd been paid by the Braddock gang to place Coulter at the scene. Admitted he'd lied. The trial lasted 3 days. On the 3rd day, the jury deliberated for 2 hours. They came back with a verdict. Not guilty. Elena burst into tears. In the defendant's chair, Coulter just sat there, stunned, like he couldn't believe it was over. The judge dismissed the case. Coulter was a free man. Outside the courthouse, Elena threw her arms around him and held on like she'd never let go. "It's over," she said. "It's really over." "I didn't think..." Coulter's voice broke. "I didn't think they'd believe me. I told you the truth mattered." "You did." He pulled back to look at her. "You saved me. Again. We saved each other." Elena touched his face. "That's what we do." They rode back to Silver Creek with an escort of townspeople who'd stayed for the trial. When they finally reached home, Grace was 6 months older and had learned to crawl. She saw Coulter and squealed with joy. He picked her up and held her close, and Elena saw tears streaming down his face. "I'm home," he said. "I'm really home." Years passed. Grace grew into a wild, fearless little girl who climbed trees and chased chickens and drove her parents crazy with equal enthusiasm. She was followed 2 years later by a brother they named Frank, after Elena's father. Then another girl, Catherine, 3 years after that. The sheriff's house got crowded fast. So did the store. So did Coulter and Elena's life. But it was a good kind of crowded, the kind that meant noise and chaos and love. Coulter served as sheriff for 15 years before he finally stepped down and let Deputy Pierce take over. He'd earned his retirement, earned the chance to spend his days helping Elena run the store, teaching his children to ride, sitting on the porch in the evenings watching Silver Creek grow. The town grew a lot. New buildings, new families, a school, a proper church, a railroad station, all the markers of civilization creeping westward. But it never forgot where it came from. Never forgot the battle that had defined it. Every year on the anniversary, they held a memorial for the 4 men who'd died defending their home. And every year, someone would ask Coulter to tell the story. He always did. With Elena beside him, filling in the details he forgot, correcting the parts he exaggerated. Their children would listen with wide eyes, even though they'd heard it 100 times. And that's when your mother ran into the street with a shotgun, Coulter would say, grinning at Elena. Because you were about to get yourself killed, she'd add. True. And then what happened? Grace would ask, even though she knew. Then we survived, Elena would say simply, and we built a life worth surviving for. On a warm evening in 1895, nearly 20 years after the battle that changed everything, Coulter and Elena sat on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Grace had married a rancher and had 3 children of her own. Frank was training to be a doctor. Catherine was still deciding what she wanted to do, which drove her parents crazy, but also made them proud. We did all right, Coulter said quietly. We did better than all right, Elena corrected. She was gray now, her face lined with years of sun and laughter. But her eyes were still sharp, still saw right through him. I never thought I'd make it this far. I know. Never thought I'd deserve to. And now? Coulter looked at his children, his grandchildren, the town he'd helped build. Looked at the woman beside him who'd refused to let him run when running was all he knew how to do. Now I think maybe deserving it was never the point. The point was just showing up, staying, doing the work even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Elena took his hand. You stayed. I did. Why? Because you asked me to, because I fell in love with you and couldn't imagine leaving, because one day I woke up and realized I'd stopped running and it didn't scare me anymore. And what did scare you? The thought of losing this, losing you, losing all of it. He squeezed her hand. Still scares me, if I'm being honest. Good. Fear means you have something worth losing. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm proud of you, you know. For what? For becoming the man you always could have been. For letting yourself be loved. For building something that will outlast both of us. Coulter looked out at Silver Creek, at the town that had saved him as much as he'd saved it. Do you think they'll remember us when we're gone? Does it matter? I don't know, maybe not. We'll be remembered by our children, our grandchildren, the people whose lives we touched. That's enough. She paused. More than enough. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the mountains. Grace called her children in for dinner. Somewhere down the street, someone was playing a fiddle. Life continued, the way it always did, carrying forward whether you were ready or not. And maybe that was the lesson, Coulter thought. Maybe the point of living wasn't to be perfect, or to never make mistakes, or to somehow earn the right to happiness. Maybe it was just to keep going, to show up every day and do your best, to love people even when it was scary, to build something, even knowing it might fall apart, to stay, even when running was easier. He'd spent so many years believing he was broken beyond repair, that his past defined him, that he didn't deserve love or peace or a place to call home. And then Elena had walked into his life, or rather, he'd walked into hers, and everything he thought he knew got turned upside down. She hadn't fixed him, couldn't fix him. Nobody could do that. But she'd loved him anyway, had seen all the broken pieces and decided they were worth staying for. And somehow, that had been enough. Not to make him perfect, not to erase his mistakes, but to help him believe he could be more than what he'd been. That was what love did, he realized. Real love. Not the fairy tale kind. Not the kind that fixed everything and made life easy, but the kind that looked at you on your worst day and said, "I'm staying anyway." The kind that held you when you had nightmares and didn't ask you to be anything other than what you were. The kind that built something together, brick by brick, day by day, until you turned around one day and realized you'd created a life. "What are you thinking about?" Elena asked. "You, liar. You've got that look you get when you're being philosophical." "Can't I be philosophical about you?" "You can, but you weren't." She poked him gently. "Come on, tell me." Coulter smiled. Even after 20 years, she could still read him like a book. "I was thinking about how lucky I am. How easily things could have gone differently. If I'd left like I planned, if you'd given up on me, if I'd kept believing I was too broken to deserve happiness. But you didn't. No. I stayed. And it was the hardest and the best decision I ever made." "You make it sound so simple." "It wasn't simple at all. It was terrifying. Still is, sometimes." "Good." Elena looked up at him. "The day you stop being afraid of losing this is the day you stop appreciating what you have." "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just weren't paying attention." He laughed and pulled her closer. Around them, Silver Creek settled into evening. Lamps were lit in windows. Doors were closed against the cooling air. Families gathered for dinner. All the small rituals of life that added up to something meaningful. This was what they'd fought for, Coulter thought. Not just survival, but the chance to build something, to matter to someone, to leave the world slightly better than they'd found it. And they had. Maybe not in any grand way. They weren't famous, wouldn't be written about in history books. But their children were good people. Their grandchildren were loved. The town they'd helped save had prospered. That was enough. More than enough. As the last light faded from the sky, Coulter stood and offered Elena his hand. "Come on, let's go inside." In a minute, she stayed seated, looking out at the town. "I want to remember this." "Remember what?" "This moment, this feeling, being here with you, knowing our family is safe, seeing what we built." She smiled. "I want to remember that it was real, that we were happy. We are happy." "I know. That's why I want to remember it." So they sat there a while longer, two people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd survived violence and fear and their own worst instincts, who'd built a life out of nothing but stubbornness and love. And when they finally went inside, when the door closed behind them and the lamps were lit and the night wrapped around their home like a blanket, Elena thought about all the stories that would be told about them someday, about the dangerous cowboy and the stubborn shopkeeper, about the battle that nearly destroyed Silver Creek, about love born in chaos and tempered by fire. Most of those stories would get the details wrong, would make them more heroic than they were, would smooth out the rough edges and forget the fear and the doubt and all the times they nearly gave up. But that was all right, because the real story, the true story, wasn't about being perfect or fearless or knowing what to do. It was about two broken people who decided to stop running, who chose each other when choosing anything would have been easier, who built something worth fighting for in a world that didn't make it easy. And maybe that was the only story that mattered. Not the legend, not the myth, but the simple truth that love, real, messy, complicated love, was always worth the risk. That home wasn't a place but a choice, that the bravest thing you could do was stay when every instinct told you to run. Elena had learned that lesson the hard way. So had Coulter. But they'd learned it together, and that made all the difference. Years later, long after they were both gone, their grandchildren would tell their own children about Sheriff Coulter Hayes and his wife Elena, about how they'd saved Silver Creek, about how they'd built a family and a legacy out of nothing but hope and stubbornness. And those children would listen with wide eyes and ask if it was true. If people could really change, if love could really save you, if broken things could really be made whole. And the answer, always, was the same. Yes. Not easily, not perfectly, but yes. Because Coulter and Elena had proven it, had lived it, had shown that the past didn't have to define you, that mistakes didn't have to destroy you, that there was always a chance, if you were brave enough to take it, to become something more than what you'd been. That was their legacy. Not the battle, not the heroics, but the simple, profound truth that it was never too late to stop running, never too late to choose love over fear, never too late to build a life worth living. And in the end, that was the only story that mattered.
Well, shit's expensive where I'm at too, man. I'm in one of the most expensive cities in the United States. In fact, in fact, salaries for some companies where I'm at are higher in Seattle than they are in some well, not just LA. Well, it depends on the area of LA, but I've seen it where Seattle has a more expensive, well, it's more cost of living is more expensive, but also your salary is typically higher than in some areas of LA now. Not to say all of LA County, right? Granted, but yeah. The longer tied here by a job, I'm likely to move away. Yeah. Joe, I have considered Canada, by the way. I really have. But yeah, it depends on where. Truly does. Ooh. I don't know this track, but I love the beat. Oh, now I know it. Oceanside, come